Hello all and welcome, and I am the Realist Philosopher, and in this video I would like to continue with my series covering logical fallacies. Now, I know many of you might ask the question, what's the importance of knowing what a logical fallacy is? Well, it's important because you need to be able to spot them when people you're talking to present you with them, so you can say to them, hey, that's BS. I know what you're saying is wrong, and here's why. It makes no sense at all. When you can learn these logical fallacies and remember the majority of them on cue, meaning that cue being when you hear one, you can dominate almost any argument. So they're very important, quite frankly. Not only are they important for being able to dominate arguments and be right, which is great, but also it allows you to identify many of the things you had currently believed to be true or make sense, and now you'll be able to do a mental inventory and say, hey, wait a second, how many things did I used to believe or do I believe that are a bunch of nonsense? All right, so you'll be able to spot the logical fallacies not only in the things you hear, but in the things you already believe to be true. And as I always like to say, you want to live as true and real and authentic a life as possible. So knowing these logical fallacies will help you do so. All right. So in my last video on this subject, I covered formal fallacies, which there are far fewer of. Now I'm going to cover the informal ones. So let's begin. First, let's define informal fallacies. So informal or inductive fallacies abound. Yeah, there's a lot of them. All right. Not only are we more likely to come across them than formal fallacies, their variations are seemingly endless. While formal fallacies are identified through an examination of the statement or claim, informal fallacies are identified through supporting evidence. In these instances, the statement or claim is not supported with adequate reasons for acceptance. A strong inductive argument follows this pattern. So, number one, fallacies of presumption. Now, presumption of truth without evidence can also cause fallacious reasoning. Examples of these fallacies include the number one, complex question fallacy. So, the complex question fallacy involves questionable assumptions. For example, are you going to admit that you're wrong? Now, answering yes, of course, would prove that you're wrong because you admitted it. Although you might just be some wimpy guy who essentially is whipped by his woman, his wayman, and you admit you're wrong just to shut her up, right? Anyhow, answering yes. So, answering yes. Let's just say for the sake of argument that proves you wrong. And answering no implies you accept you're wrong but won't admit it. So essentially this question presumes guilt either way. This is similar to when Shakespeare in that play, that Shakespearean play, I think thou doth protest too much. It's basically saying if you protest a lot, you're somehow guilty, right? So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You admit you did it, you're guilty. If you argue that you didn't do it, you're also guilty. All right, so that's a complex question fallacy, right? It involves questionable assumptions, okay? Number two, the hasty generalization fallacy. So it's an inference drawn from insufficient evidence. So for example, it is warmer this year in Las Vegas as compared to last year. Therefore, global warming is rapidly accelerating. All right, okay, so you're making a jump to a hasty generalization on a broad scale just from something very specific. So this is what I call a classification error, right? You are taking the specific and trying to apply it to the general. And this is a very, very common logical fallacy that people make all the time. You got to be very careful not to mix up your categories in regards to the general and specific. You have to be able to identify the specific and identify the general and understand that they're both completely separate categories. Okay? Post hoc ergo propter hoc. This meaning after this, therefore because of this. So this is kind of like when you hear somebody say correlation does not equal causation. So after this, therefore because of this, it's based upon an assumption of cause and effect. So A happened, then B happened, so A must have caused B, right? Wrong. Okay, so, for example, if I snap my finger and then a chicken lays an egg. There's no chicken here, by the way. But if there was a chicken and it just happened to lay an egg, some people might say, oh, Snapping your finger made the chicken lay the egg. Of course not. It was just coincidental, right? So it's a very easy fallacy to make, very easy fallacy. And, I'll give you a couple more examples other than the chicken. So every time my brother Bill uses hairspray, it's an extremely hot day. So, so it's hot, and that's why he uses his hairspray. Or is the hairspray making the day hot? Another example, I saw a magpie, and then I crashed my car. Magpies are bad luck. You see? It's just correlation does not equal causation. All right. Anyhow, next. Cum hoc ergo propter hoc. This fallacy, meaning this, therefore because of this, is when the person making the argument connects two events which happen simultaneously and assume that one caused the other. So hospitals are full of sick people, therefore hospitals make people sick. What? Oh boy. Yeah. Another example. Supermarkets are full of fat people, so supermarkets make people fat. No. They eat too much. All right. Anyway, so yeah, two things occurring simultaneously, being in the same vicinity, or one cause the other. No. Okay, the next fallacy, roughly translated, is the look who's talking fallacy. And it's essentially used to turn criticism against the other person. For example, you shouldn't have that second piece of cake. It's so fattening. Reply, didn't you eat an entire tub of ice cream yesterday? Woo! All right, so it's kind of an equivalency thing, right? So you eat a lot, so I can eat a lot too, and it's okay. One cancels out the other, right? Or you have no room, you have no place to be telling me what to do, you have no place to be giving me advice on how to eat because you eat horribly. So essentially, the person is saying that your argument, your advice is null and void because you've done the same thing. Just because somebody else has done the same thing they're arguing that you don't do doesn't in any way, shape, or form nullify their advice. I mean, if somebody tells you not to drink and drive, and you say, yeah, you drank and drive a week ago, right? You drank and drove a week ago, so don't tell me not to drink and drive. And then you drink and drive. Wait a second. How did this person, whether they're related to you or close to you or not, or you don't know them, could be a random person, how does them doing something wrong somehow negate the wrongness of your action? It's a logical fallacy, right? Because what you're doing, either it's wrong or it's right. It doesn't matter what other people do, okay? It doesn't justify your actions, right? So you're trying to use the wrongdoings of others to justify your own wrongdoings. So it's a logical fallacy. Okay, so next logical fallacy is a circular argument. This one's great. I love this one. So I give you a very easy example right off the bat. Okay, so what proof do we have that, there's a God, right? We've got writings. We've got some historical writings, right? We got some dude 2,000 years ago said there was. We got lots of dudes that have said there's lots of different gods, right? Why should we accept any one as being any more real than another when they all have the same evidence, right? But anyway, we got all these competing religions. Let's just choose one, all right? The Christian God. Okay, somebody 2,000 years ago, not necessarily 2,000 years ago either. I mean, you got the Council of Nicaea, and that all these bishops got together and, were compiling all the different written accounts and books and, the different, writings of the different disciples of Jesus and all this and, editing the Bible. Yeah, the Bible was edited. There were some books that were omitted. They just didn't fit or didn't work with the overall scheme of it. And, so let's just choose that one, right? Okay, so Christianity, right? Somebody wrote a book, compiled a book 2,000 years ago. Not a very good book either. It's kind of crappy, really. And, the book says that God exists, right? And somebody says, well, God's real. And you ask, well, how do you know that? Well, the Bible says so. And what other evidence do we have besides the Bible? Don't need any. The Bible says so, so God's real. You can't resort to the source to prove the source. You need corroborating evidence, right? So anyway, yeah, that would be an example of a circular argument. So it's also referred to as the circulus probando. This fallacy is when an argument takes its proof from a factor within the argument itself rather than one from an external source. Right, as I said, you need some kind of corroborating evidence, meaning something outside of the actual argument itself. Your argument for God is because the Bible says so, but I get my argument from God from the Bible. What? It's a circular argument. So here's another example. I believe that Frosted Flakes are great because it says so on the Frosted Flakes box. See that? But you run into that all the time, right? And some circular arguments can be harder to spot than others. But whenever it's something that's self-referencing or using the argument itself or the source of the argument to prove the argument itself, you have no corroborating outside external evidence, then it's a circular argument, okay? Anyhow, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. And if you would, kick me maybe $1 or $2 a month on Patreon. The link is below in the description of this video. And there's also a Patreon page I have that has my podcast. It's a per-piece donation platform. So I make 2 of those a week. So if you want to listen to my podcast, which is essentially much more raw, much more real, full of very dark humor, all right, very male-oriented content, discussing political, social commentary, a lot of comedy, a lot of humor, a lot of good philosophy. You might want to check that out. And also, go to my Twitter and follow me there at TheRealist1967. And that's it. I will be back next time with another video covering more informal fallacies. I am the Realist Philosopher, and I wish you a good day. Take care.